$750,000. That's what it cost to build Old Comiskey Park on the south side of Chicago in 1910. They called it the Baseball Palace of the World. For 80 years, it was one of the most storied ballparks in American history, the site of baseball's first All-Star game, the most infamous scandal the sport has ever seen, and one of the strangest nights in the history of professional sports. By 1991, they tore it down. And the new stadium they built directly across the street, the one that was supposed to save baseball on the south side, they named it the same thing, as if the original never existed. This is not just a story about a ballpark. It is a story about a city, a century of scandal, and what happens when a sport tries to bury its own history. In the spring of 1909, Charles Comiskey bought a 14-acre plot at 35th Street and Shields Avenue. The seller was the estate of former Chicago Mayor John Wentworth. The transaction cost $100,000, a massive cash layout for land the city of Chicago had long used as a municipal garbage dump. This was contested, working-class ground, a swamp of urban discard on the south side. Transforming this landfill into a civic monument required an architect with immense ambition. Comiskey hired Zachary Taylor Davis, an Armour Institute graduate who had apprenticed under Louis Sullivan. To draft the blueprints, Davis toured existing major league stadiums with White Sox pitcher Ed Walsh. Walsh wanted a home that favored arm strength over bat speed. His influence shaped the field's deep outfield geometry, 362 feet down the foul lines and a massive 420 feet to straightaway center, with deep foul territory stretching 98 feet behind home plate. The construction was a marvel of speed, taking less than 5 months. On St. Patrick's Day, Davis knelt on sod imported from Ireland to lay a green cornerstone on the first base side, a ritual meant to bring luck to the franchise. Yet, the build was marred by the friction of Chicago labor. A steelworkers' strike delayed the upper deck, and a fatal on-site accident claimed the life of a laborer in May. Charles Comiskey, a deeply superstitious man, refused to allow the park to open on a Friday, fearing it would curse the team for generations. The gates swung open on Saturday, July 1, 1910. A sweltering 92-degree heat wave gripped the city, causing 10 heat-related deaths across Chicago that afternoon. Inside the new steel and concrete stands, nearly 28,000 fans wearing straw hats paid 25 cents to watch the White Sox lose their debut 2-0 to the St. Louis Browns. 4 years later, Zachary Taylor Davis would design another historic ballpark on the city's north side, the venue that became Wrigley Field, forever linking Chicago's bitter baseball rivals through a single architect's drawing board. On July 6, 1933, the eyes of the sporting world converged on 35th and Shields. The nation was locked in the depths of the Great Depression, and Chicago was hosting the Century of Progress World's Fair. Arch Ward, the sports editor for the Chicago Tribune, proposed a bold, one-time exhibition to lift the country's spirits. He envisioned a game where the greatest players from the American and National Leagues would share a single field. 48,000 fans packed the grandstands of Comiskey Park, transforming the local venue into a national stage. In the third inning, Babe Ruth stepped to the plate and launched a historic 2-run blast into the right field stands, recording the first home run in All-Star history. Ruth's shot powered the American League to a 4-2 victory. What Ward conceived as a temporary promotional stunt instantly became a permanent American tradition. Comiskey Park had elevated itself from a neighborhood anchor to a national cathedral of the sport. The game's success cemented the park's status as a premier venue for major events, a place where history was not just hosted, but made. That legacy was honored again in 1950, and once more in 1983, when the All-Star Game returned to the South Side to celebrate its golden anniversary on the very grass where it was born. Yet this national monument, which had proven its irreplaceable value to the American cultural fabric, would eventually be treated as entirely disposable. In the autumn of 1919, the stadium became the ground for professional baseball's foundational fracture. The White Sox had dominated the American League with an 88-52 record and entered the World Series heavily favored against the Cincinnati Reds. But behind the team's on-field success lay a deep resentment toward owner Charles Comiskey's cheap payroll. Seeking financial security, 8 players, including ace pitcher Eddie Cicotte, star outfielder Shoeless Joe Jackson, and pitcher Lefty Williams, agreed to take cash from a gambling syndicate. The price to throw the World Series was roughly $5,000 per player. On October 1st, during Game 1 at Comiskey, Cicotte delivered the prearranged signal. With his second pitch, he hit Cincinnati's leadoff batter squarely in the back, confirming to gamblers that the fix was on. The Reds took the series, 5-3. By September 1920, the scheme collapsed before a Chicago grand jury. Signed confessions were secured, yet these original documents mysteriously vanished from the court files before the trial began. Though a jury acquitted all 8 players in 1921, the newly appointed commissioner, Kennesaw Mountain Landis, bypassed the legal system and banned them for life. The ban froze Jackson's legacy in amber. He had played brilliantly, hitting .375 with no errors and the series' only home run, numbers that keep his Hall of Fame debate alive 106 years later. Back at 35th and Shields, the immediate cost of the betrayal was an 86-year championship drought that haunted the South Side until 2005. The baseball palace survived, but its competitive soul was broken. On June 22, 1937, 65,000 spectators squeezed into Comiskey Park to watch a 23-year-old challenger make history. In the 8th round, Joe Louis knocked out James J. Braddock, claiming the heavyweight championship and starting an 11-year title reign. For the black community on Chicago's South Side, this was a profound civic triumph, a moment of collective pride during the Great Migration. This same turf served as the stage for the Negro League East-West All-Star Game. From 1933 to 1960, the annual showcase packed the grandstands, bringing thousands of visitors to the Bronzeville neighborhood. In its inaugural year, 49,000 fans flooded the park, actually outdrawing the Major League All-Star Game held there just weeks earlier. From 1941 to 1950, the legendary Chicago American Giants shared Comiskey, playing home games when the White Sox were on the road and fielding players whose athletic brilliance was barred from the segregated majors. Yet, in the official histories of the White Sox and the stadium itself, this rich history is treated as a mere footnote. The thriving black civic life that once claimed 35th and Shields as its own is paved over, proving that professional sports often preserve the history of a corporate franchise while completely erasing the history of the neighborhood. In 1959, Bill Veeck purchased the White Sox and immediately set out to transform the aging ballpark into a populist carnival. To keep the deteriorating facility profitable, Veeck relied on pure theatrical distraction. In May 1960, he unveiled baseball's first exploding scoreboard. When Al Smith homered, the structure erupted in a chaos of sirens, flashing lights, and aerial mortar bombs, prompting a disgusted Mickey Mantle to throw a ball at it in protest. Veeck turned Comiskey into a giant neighborhood tavern. He installed an outdoor shower in the bleachers, built a left-field picnic area, and began piping broadcaster Harry Caray's off-key rendition of Take Me Out to the Ball Game through the stadium speakers. In 1970, a young organist named Nancy Faust took her seat behind the keyboard, beginning a 40-year run where her sharp, reactive playing provided the soundtrack for a stadium fighting to stay alive. These spectacles were a survival strategy, a noisy mask for the physical decay of a park that the city was already beginning to outgrow. On July 12, 1979, the White Sox staged a promotion that exposed a raw, aggressive undercurrent in American culture. Radio disc jockey Steve Dahl, recently fired when his station switched to a disco format, had built an angry, anti-disco following at WLUP-FM. Promotions director Mike Veeck saw an opportunity, offering 98-cent admission to anyone who brought a disco record to be blown up between games of a doubleheader. The Sox, averaging 15,000 fans, expected 35,000. Instead, over 60,000 swarmed the stadium, leaving only 50 off-duty police officers to manage the gates. During the first game, vinyl records, firecrackers, and lighters rained from the grandstands. Then, in center field, Dahl detonated a dumpster packed with the records. The explosion tore a crater in the sod, and thousands of fans stormed the playing surface, lighting bonfires, destroying batting cages, and stealing the bases. Police made 39 arrests, but the field was ruined, forcing the White Sox to forfeit the second game to Detroit, the last forfeit in American League history. This was framed as a harmless prank, but the anger targeted a music culture born in Black, Latino, and gay communities. Mike Veeck's baseball career stalled, and Bill Veeck sold the franchise 2 years later. By the 1980s, Comiskey Park had become Major League Baseball's oldest stadium, having received no major structural upgrades since 1927. The physical decay of the once proud palace was now inescapable. Loose electrical wires hung from dark corridors, chunks of broken concrete fell from the upper decks, and chipped asphalt lined the concourses. In 1989, shortstop Ozzie Guillen gave a blunt assessment to the Sporting News. "It's an awful place. Young players come to the big leagues and say, 'That's big league?'" This neglect was the physical manifestation of municipal policy and neighborhood disinvestment. Hemmed in by the Dan Ryan Expressway and low-income housing projects, the stadium suffered from decades of redlining on the south side. Attendance plummeted so severely that the team had even played a portion of its home schedule in Milwaukee during the 1968 and 1969 seasons. When Jerry Reinsdorf bought the franchise, his engineering studies concluded that retrofitting the historic structure was financially impractical. The park could simply no longer generate modern corporate revenue. Public officials and owners presented a false choice to the fans: either subsidize a brand new stadium with public funds or lose the White Sox to another city entirely. In 1988, Jerry Reinsdorf gave Illinois politicians a hard midnight deadline of June 30th. If they did not approve a taxpayer-funded arena, the White Sox would pack up and move to Florida. St. Petersburg already had a guaranteed deal waiting, along with a brand new empty 43,000-seat venue called the Suncoast Dome. As the midnight deadline approached in Springfield, the state legislature was deadlocked. With the clock ticking down and the bill still short of the required votes, House Speaker Michael Madigan took control. At 11:59 p.m., Madigan ordered the physical chamber clock in the House to be stopped. While the official state record remained frozen in time, backroom deals were struck. The bill finally passed at 12:03 a.m. on July 1st, though the legislative clock still read 11:59. This political maneuver authorized a $150 million public bond package to build a new stadium directly across the street from the historic park. St. Petersburg, left at the altar, would wait until 1998 for an expansion team, while Comiskey's fate was sealed by a legislative clock that stood still. Throughout the 1990 season, fans sitting in the grandstands of Old Comiskey looked past the outfield to see a giant shadow creeping over their history. Day by day, the skeleton of the new, modern stadium rose directly across the street. The end was no longer a political threat. It was a physical structure of concrete and steel, growing taller with every inning. On September 30th, the final chapter arrived. A crowd packed the park one last time to watch the White Sox beat the Seattle Mariners 2-1. When the final out was recorded, ending more than 6,000 Major League games played over 80 seasons, the stadium fell into a heavy, emotional silence. The exploding scoreboard lit up with a final message: "Thanks for the memories." Comiskey Park, 1910 to 1990. In the stands and on the field, fans and decades-long employees stood frozen, openly weeping. 80 years of collective memory was about to be cleared away. In January 1991, wrecking balls reduced the baseball palace of the world to rubble, paving the way for a 7,500-car parking lot. Today, a lone marble plaque embedded in the asphalt marks where home plate once sat, with white foul lines painted over the parking spaces, a ghost of a field buried under commuter transit. Across the street, the rushed replacement stadium arose. Architects had offered a retro, classic design reminiscent of Camden Yards, but Jerry Reinsdorf refused to delay construction. The resulting concrete giant, which ironically inherited the Comiskey name, was widely panned as cold, cavernous, and soulless. Its towering upper deck so distant it was nicknamed the mistake across the street. When the White Sox finally won the World Series in 2005, the victory parade circled this asphalt footprint. But while Wrigley Field still stands on the north side, full of life and history, Old Comiskey remains a flat sheet of gray concrete. Today, a sterile asphalt parking lot covers the ground where 80 years of Chicago's soul was forged. When cities treat sacred cultural spaces as disposable commodities, we lose more than steel and brick. We erase our shared memory. Old Comiskey's death warns us that history is only as permanent as our willingness to defend it. What do you think of this loss? Let's discuss in the comments.